I just helped runners eliminate tightness without stretching more. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly why stretching isn't fixing your mobility and what you should be doing instead to run faster, stay pain-free, and actually feel loose and limber during your runs. Because if stretching actually worked while you're still tight at mile 3, why are your hamstrings still pulling? Why do your hips still feel locked up, even though you stretch every single day? As a physical therapist and run coach, I see this all the time. Runners stretching daily, still getting injured. So today I'm going to break down the biggest myth in running. Stretching isn't the problem, it's the way you're using it. See, the problem, here's what most runners do. They'll tight hamstrings, they'll stretch it. 30 seconds. Tight calves, also 30-second calf stretch. Hip pain, they'll stretch their hip flexion for 30 seconds. They stretch before the runs, they stretch after the runs. Some even stretch every single night or every single morning. And yet, they still feel tight, restricted, injury prone, and they start thinking, maybe I just need to stretch more. Maybe I need to take up some yoga classes, spend more time stretching. And don't get me wrong, I am a fan of yoga myself too. That stuff can help, but it's not always the solution. And that's where runners get stuck, because what nobody tells you this is that tightness is not always a flexibility problem, right? It's not like, oh, you're not just stretching enough. It's a lot of times, it's a strength and motor control problem, right? A stability problem. And if you don't fix that, you'll stretch forever and never feel better, right? And can you improve your flexibility, right? Yes, you can, right? There's someone here is doing a forward bend, and then after some time, they were able to do a deeper forward bend. This is like lumbar flexion, hip flexion. However, there's more to it than just stretching alone. There's people who will get stuck in this image here on the left for years because they're not training the right things. They're just doing passive or static stretching alone and not doing other parts of what makes up what I call mobility. So if you want a copy of this breakdown in my mobility system for runners, I'm sharing inside my free school community, link in the description. So what's actually going on? See, step one, understand the difference between flexibility and mobility. The biggest mistake runners make. Flexibility is just how far you can go, like a passive stretch, how far you could passively stretch a muscle. While mobility is more active, how well you can control that position, active control. And let me give you an example, right? So with the forward bend toe touching. You might be able to touch your toes, by the way, because I understand that everyone has the same levels or ability levels. There are some people here who's watching this who could touch their toes. But can you control that position under the load, right? Can you hold like a heavy weight and be in that position? Can you use that mobility from the forward bend to also use it while you're running? Can you produce force from that position? Can you like kind of jump up or produce power? And if not, that flexibility doesn't transfer over to running. That's why you feel tight again during your run. Right, so you could do these passive stretches, but it's not the same as having active dynamic or motor control of those joint positions, right? We got active, you got passive, and you also got the motor control, the neurological system that's also involved in how you move, right? So if your brain and nervous system doesn't feel safe with a movement, it's going to restrict you. It's like, no way, buddy, you're not strong enough to go into that position or that hold. We're going to limit you. We're going to stiffen you up. So why stretching doesn't stick for runners? A lot of runners will stretch for their hamstrings, right? 30 seconds. Heck, they may even stretch for a few minutes, and they may feel good for temporarily for a few minutes, and they go for a run, and then they tighten up again by like mile 2, mile 3. And then why? Because your body doesn't trust that range. Your nervous system is saying, I don't feel strong here, so I'm going to tighten things up to protect you. So what you feel as tightness is actually your body trying to keep you safe. Again, your body is innervated by hundreds of different nerves. Right down the leg, you got the sciatic nerve. So while bending forward, you may feel the pull all the way down from your butt, your hamstring, your calf to your foot. And that's not a muscle that you're stretching. That's oftentimes you're actually feeling the pull along the nervous system, the sciatic nerve, like a nerve tension actually. And then there are people with back pain when they do a forward bend, actually causes them leg pain, right? And then they think it's a hamstring issue when in fact it's actually a low back and like nervous system issue. So the real reason, many runners feel tight, and this is where it gets important, because many runners feel tight either because of, weakness, like muscle weakness, right? Weak glutes, right? Or the weak hip abductors or core. They lack hip extension, active hip extension, lack of control in the end ranges, or hip abduction or internal rotation. There's so many different things. We're at the ankles, we got ankle dorsiflexion. We're at the back, we got lumbar extension, thoracic extension. And they don't know how to properly control the end ranges. Like they might be able to stretch a little bit back, but then they can't really control it. They don't have the motor control to move into those positions with proper control without feeling all shaky or wobbly or feel like they're about to like fall over, For example, if your glutes are weak, you won't get proper hip extension when you run. So your hamstrings start doing extra work. Now they feel tight, but they're not actually tight. It's that they're overworked. So oftentimes people say, oh, they got hamstring tightness, when it's actually they just don't have strong enough glutes. Or a lot of times people say, oh, my Achilles feels tight. And when it's actually their calf that needs to be strengthened. But many runners think that they strengthen their muscles with just running alone. No, you have to oftentimes do targeted strength work to actually isolate the muscles, to strengthen them, to make it easier for you to run, and also address a lot of these stiffness issues can usually be tied to some motor control or muscle strength weakness issues above or below the chain. So with the ankles, usually either the gastroc or the tibialis anterior, or with the hamstring or the knee, it's usually the hamstring or even the quadriceps or even the glutes, but even in the core. But there's so many different things to look at. That's why it's important to work with an expert to get a proper movement assessment to see what's your weak link. Because sometimes trying to guess it, figure it out on your own, you oftentimes get stuck. And then you start to conclude, oh, I'm just naturally tight. Oh, stretching doesn't work for me. I've been stretching for years. I'm not getting any better. See, the thing is that passive static stretching alone doesn't fix a problem. Oftentimes, again, you have to address this strength issue, this motor control issue. So why passive stretching alone fails? That's the big one. Passive stretching, again, you relax into position, you breathe, but running is not passive. Running is active. It's dynamic, force-based, right? It's a series of single leg hops. And those single leg hops are high impact, 2 to 3 times your body weight, right? So if you're a 150-pound runner, that's 300 to 450 pounds of force every time your leg hits the ground. So if you can't control that range, produce force in that range, right? Active hip extension, active ankle plantar flexion, right? Knee extension, right? Or even the shock absorption, a knee flexion. If you can't control and produce forces throughout the range, your body's going to stiffen up. It's going to protect you. So you're going to have a limited range of motion to move in. Your body won't keep it. That's why stretching, always static stretching tends to feel temporary. Not saying you can't do it, but you also need to pair it with other active and dynamic things. So what to do instead, right? Instead of just stretching, you need to build strength and control in those ranges. That's what I call active mobility. Here's what that looks like, right? You might do a split squat hold, like a deep lunge. Single leg RDLs. You might do it with body weight, but then you start holding a light weight. You could do weighted stretches or weighted mobility drills. Hip extension drills, where you go into hip extension, but you also do hip extension with weights as well. And then obviously the controlled lunges, loaded mobility work. Well, for example, let's say you're working on ankle dorsiflexion. You actually do ankle dorsiflexion from like a loaded position. More of your body weight is loading through the joint, going further and further, and they can even hold weights. You can hold a weight in your hand or wear a weighted backpack or a weighted vest, right? You could do loaded mobility work. Now you're telling your body, I'm strong here, I can control this. Like another simple thing is if you're stretching your back out, instead of just doing a forward bend, you could do an active forward bend, but also hold a weight, something called like a Jefferson curl, where you kind of curl your body forward and essentially getting a stretch while going into forward bend with a weight in your hand. But again, if you're in pain or dealing with injury, obviously work with someone who understands and how to help you get rid of that pain. Someone like a physical therapist who understands working with runners. Someone like myself, I'm both a physical therapist and a run coach. But over time, your body gives you more range when you learn how to control the different end ranges, especially actively, not just passively, and it actually sticks. Right? This is where people now can use like a squat to help improve the range of motion, right? Here's some examples. You can even do weighted squat to also help improve your range of motion. Like a goblet squat's a great tool. You could do this kind of a daily basis with a light weight or even body weight. And same thing with the deep lunge, right? You could improve hip extension there. You could lean a bit forward, improve ankle dorsiflexion. So many different options here, but you could see what I mean by active control. And it's functional, right? It's not just passive, not just, one simple joint at a time. So how it applies directly to running, this is where everything clicks. When you improve mobility the right way, you get better hip extension, more power, less compensation, fewer injuries, better stride, more efficiency. So instead of stretch more to feel loose, you shift to train your body to own the range. So what happens when you fix this? Here's what I've seen with runners I work with. They stop feeling tight mid-run. They oftentimes, many of them are like marathoners, half marathoners, and they find that they could complete the whole race without hitting the wall, without like bonking or crashing, because sometimes it's not the issue with nutrition or fueling. It's actually your body just gets too rigid or too tight. And when it's nice and limber, you don't feel like your legs seize up on you or they get really tight and rigid. Right? You feel more fluid, able to complete your long distance runs or marathons, etc. A lot of nagging injuries just start going away, and they rely less on just passive stretching and actually feel better. So I've had runners who stretch daily for years, and within weeks of switching to this approach, this active mobility approach, within just a few weeks, they finally started to notice actually gains when they thought that they were just naturally tight. They felt more loose with running, not just before, but after, during. So I currently have a few spots open to work with me privately one-to-one, where I help runners build mobility, strength, and a smart run plan so they can run pain-free and actually improve your performance. If you're curious, there's a link to apply in the description. First come, first serve. So in conclusion, the takeaway: stretching isn't useless, but it's incomplete. Tightness is often a strength problem, not flexibility. If you don't control the range, your body won't keep it. And most importantly, mobility is what transfers to running, not just passive stretching. So if you've been stretching for years and still feel tight, now you know why. Fix the real problem and everything changes. And if this helped you, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.